I remember the day like years ago when I realized like one day, like I will die. Every human being in the history of mankind has died. And I realized that if I don't move to Israel, if I don't make aliyah, I will regret it at 50. I'll regret it at 40. I'll regret it at 35. And that realization matched with not wanting to sit on the sidelines and also realizing that through my work, I have this incredible gift to actually be on the ground here. It kind of pushed me out.
Welcome to 20-Minute Leaders. Just sit back, relax, and learn from the leaders of today. It's a journey. Each one is different, unique, inspiring. Let's get started. 20-Minute Leaders is a proud supporter of Make-A-Wish Israel and Tech to Peace, and is in proud collaboration with Secret Chord Ventures, J Ventures, Riverside FM, Fusion VC, Birthright Excel, J Impact, Leap, Google for Startups, and Hippo, and in media partnership with CTech. Hello, welcome to 20-Minute Leaders. This is a really cool story by Justin Hayet, the Chief Operating Officer of Bnai Zion, aiming to accelerate Israel's growth and perpetuating social impact through partnerships and meaningful projects. He is a very young leader who's only 28, who made an aliya a year ago and currently lives in Tel Aviv. Previous to that, he worked at the United Nations as a senior strategic consultant for Dani Danon. He used to give him tips before meetings, comment on his speeches, and had a major input in building strategic plans. Justin describes those years as the proximity of power.
Tell me a little bit about yourself. Today, you're the Chief Operating Officer of Bnai Zion. You've done some monumental work also with the Israeli ambassador to the UN as a strategic advisor, and today you're working on continuing to make a positive impact on Israel through different channels, different type of strategy. So tell me a little bit about yourself and where this passion to work for Israel in Israel, where all that's coming from.
Yeah. I came to Israel for the first time in 2009. I was the first person in my family to ever come to Israel. I always kind of joke and laugh with my grandparents that if only my ancestors went, east instead of west, my life would have been a lot easier. But instead of leaving Russia and going to Israel, they came to America. Israel was always that poster in a Hebrew school, class that was kind of faded. The kid in the Dead Sea. Hebrew school is not the most sexy thing in the world. No one likes Hebrew school. And so when looking back, I'm always like horrified at that chance that I never came here because I made the association with, faded girl from the 90s, in a poster at Hebrew school in the Dead Sea and in Hebrew school. And that, thank God.
Take me back. So you're saying this poster, the faded girl, the Dead Sea, Israel's not a place for a young teenager to go to have fun, at least in this perspective.
Yeah, my first association with Israel was learning about it from the least fun place ever, which is Reformed Jewish, Hebrew school, where I was kind of the class clown and kind of like the head of a group of, misfits. And then, increasingly all the friends I had in Hebrew school became increasingly less interested in Jewish life, if they ever were, right? And certainly less interested in Israel. And then all of a sudden I go to Israel for the first time in 2009. And it's kind of before the Iron Dome. And it's a very different Israel than we have today. And, you come to this beautiful place, you fall in love with it as a tourist and as a kid, of course. And then you realize that the world's a scary place and that, bad people want to hurt this place. And it kind of changes the way you think. And you realize that you can't look at the Middle East and you can't look at Israel from the comfort of your suburban American home. And I think that stuck with me. I never really saw evil as a kid. I never really saw terror as a kid. The closest thing was this kid who lived down the street. His dad murdered his mom. And then he killed himself. That was the extent of my, quote unquote trauma as a kid. And it's
pretty rough,
frightening, awful. Yeah, it was really scary. But suburban America in 1990s, it's pretty peaceful. And then 9/11 happens, and you're trying to piece that together as a kid. And it's kind of the first experience with terrorism, which was so far away, grew up in Baltimore, and that happened in the Pentagon, happened in a field, I believe, in Pennsylvania, and then, of course, in the Twin Towers. And then I remember my first image of Israel was, I think it was 2002. It was that the terror attack at the bat mitzvah or bar mitzvah, the suicide bombing. And, I said to my parents on TV, I was always very curious, what is that? Where is that? And they said, oh, it's in Israel. The floor fell through. I was like in third grade or so. They didn't tell me the entire truth. So my first image of Israel was both the faded poster at Hebrew school, and then kind of like terror and really awful images that I probably shouldn't have seen as a kid. And I think both of those together really helped inform my like broader perspective at a very young age.
Mm-hmm. And so transitioning then 13 years ago, you're coming to Israel. It's one thing to change perspective and to maybe perhaps get reacquainted with a culture or a country, but it's another thing to go and now dedicate a career or dedicate years to the mission of supporting that country. So what happened there? Where did that intrinsic drive come from?
Yeah, well, it's from my perspective, it's really interesting. The last two, not including the current, but the last two ambassadors of Israel to the United States were both American born. And I've always been so fascinated with like the American born ambassador who has to give up his citizenship, and who says this is one is the land of my birth and one is my country and my homeland. And, for me, it's a really bizarre experience. Obviously that I'm not the ambassador to the United States, but for me, it's a really bizarre experience to say that my home now is a place where I have no family. And I think it's kind of this constant pull and torture that many Olim kind of face and that they willingly face. And I think in one way, I think it makes Israel stronger that you have people who are willing to not suffer, but to have a sense of pain being far away from family. But there's also something so striking and beautiful about it. And it creates a great energy in the city. And you hear it in Dizengoff Center, Dizengoff Square, and Habima, when you hear French, Spanish, Italian, English, British people speaking English, Australian people speaking English, South Africans. And for me, at least, I think making aliya was very different in 2021 than it was in 2019. And I think increasingly the center of gravity of the Jewish world is shifting more and more to Israel and away from the power cities of New York and LA, Miami, and DC. They're still great. But I think in the coming years that the center of the Jewish world is in Israel, the center of the action is in Israel. And me and dozens of friends I have who are also Olim, we're ready and eager to be a part of it. And in thinking back to, those two ambassadors, I think there's something intrinsic that we can offer Israel that, that as people who see it from the outside, but now live within it and now are integrating in, I think there's a great energy there. And through my career, which, I'm only been working 5 years or something, trying to integrate that energy and that perspective and that passion into my work. And I once heard a great line, and it was, don't do what you're passionate about, do what you're good at. And I kind of have this struggle with it because what I am passionate about, thankfully, I'm someone good at, but really trying to focus on the broader picture and the broader goal and not always what I'm good at.
Why do you think that your perspective in Israel, this is not a challenge, this is curiosity, why is your perspective on sort of what's happening here coming from outside of Israel? How do you see that different from somebody who's in it? Right? I mean, intuitively, we obviously, somebody who's looking at something from the outside sees something different than from the inside. That's fine. But in what ways, tangible ways, do you find your perspective is different than somebody who's coming from the inside?
Yeah, that's, I get a very similar question, which from many people, which is, why would you leave New York? The Israelis can't really fathom this. But, I think back, there's a few things. The first of which, my hometown, it's kind of like a third ultra-Orthodox, a third secular Jews, and a third kind of conservative Jews. And over COVID and over the increasingly anti-Semitic attacks happening across the U.S., I would drive on Saturdays and I would see, Haredi or Orthodox people walking, visibly Jewish, and I would really think to myself, are they actually safe? Are they safe in America? Are they safe in Baltimore? And I don't want to have like apocalyptic, no, they're not safe. They have to come to Israel. But and then I think about that in comparison to like when I walk past Chabad in Tel Aviv, or I walk past a shul in Tel Aviv or in Jerusalem, and I do think that the security of the Jews outside of Israel is significantly lower than the security of the Jews living in Israel. And I think it's something that the American Jewish community is starting to wake up on. The Jewish Federations of North America has been successfully lobbying Congress to increase funding, federal funding to Jewish institutions. You see new Jewish organizations with massive funding coming out of COVID with the sole goal of investing in technologies and applications that will protect shuls from Texas to California to New York. So I think it's broader kind of security as a Jew. And that contrasted with, yes, but whereas here, it's the security of the Jewish state, and that comes with its own threats and its own challenges, with the threat from the north, Gaza, terror in Judea, Samaria, so we can't, I came here because I feel one, it's where I'm safest as a Jew. I came here because I always connected with the story of Zionism, and I didn't want to kind of sit on the sidelines. I didn't want to be like a Jew who just goes to a bunch of conferences and galas. Like I did that, it was fine, but it's not really enriching enough for me. And the third is that I think we all die one day. And I remember the day years ago when I realized one day, I will die. Every human being in the history of mankind has died. You will not beat it. George Washington died. Elon Musk could die. Who knows? He could find a way to stay alive forever. And it was a really humbling moment a few years ago. And I said, okay, so what if I don't do X, I will regret Y. And I realized that if I don't move to Israel, if I don't make aliyah, I will regret it at 50, I'll regret it at 40, I'll regret it at 35. And that realization matched with not wanting to sit on the sidelines, and also realizing that through my work, I have this incredible gift to actually be on the ground here. It kind of pushed me out. Also COVID helped me think about life.
Incredible. That's just it also sounds like you really got in tune with what's important to you and being able to ask those meaningful questions. You've decided to join Bnai Zion as Chief Operating Officer. What do you do there? What is the role of this organization? And actively, how do you interact with them the day to day?
Yeah, so we're one of the oldest Zionist organizations in America. It was founded by immigrants in the early 20th century who came to America and who, didn't speak English. They were from Hungary. They were from Russia. They were from Poland, and they needed basic needs, whether it was healthcare or, insurance, all these different things. So for a while, it wasn't even a nonprofit in the early 20th century. Then as American Jews rose to prominence, made money, seized the American dream, I believe it was 1951, they established Bnai Zion as a philanthropic entity. And they hosted these big galas with President Gerald Ford. Joe Biden was actually an honoree as a young senator. And they started doing philanthropy in Israel, gave some amazing gifts to organizations in their infancy, like Magen David Adom. We gave a major gift to Bnai Zion Medical Center to make it Bnai Zion Medical Center. And basically, right before the pandemic, because life works in mysterious ways, I get a call and they say, this rabbi wants to meet with you. And I was really comfortable in my job. I was working at other private foundation. And I meet with this guy, and it right before the world shut down and right before our lives forever changed. And we were talking for 3 hours about what we wanted to build in the Jewish world in America and what don't we like about the current Jewish world. It's easy to complain, but we were talking about what is our dream organization and how could we build it. Little did we know that there was a tsunami approaching, which was COVID. I think I had COVID at that dinner. I think I gave it to him or the flu or something. So we meet in like mid-February. By mid-March, I'm working for the organization. And all of a sudden, organizations are closing their doors. Organizations are starting to think about merging, starting to think about how they're going to fundraise. Our organization, thankfully, has a pretty sizable endowment that it will keep us more than alive and able to be active philanthropically for many years to come. But it was a great moment of thinking about what are we doing? What are our goals? And what can we, as the youngest leadership team in the Jewish world, I'm 28, he's 36. If friends of mine can have startups or companies and manage, hundreds of people, surely Jewish organizations can be run by people under 40. And so now we're putting that all into action through various projects and initiatives, both philanthropic, dealing with new media, dealing with the size and scope with a specific focus on creating partnerships and relationships with our friends and allies in other faith communities, focusing on major TikTok influencers, focusing on major Instagram celebrities. Later this week, we have an NBA player with 2 million followers landing in Israel for the first time. I can't say it will be public. It'll be known when this podcast comes out who that is. But this is an opportunity.
But if you tell me now, you have to kill me.
Yeah, exactly. But it's not so complicated. But we're scrappy enough to get to the right people, to get to the people with millions of followers, bring them to Israel, not for some hodgepodge, Hasbara trip, because frankly, I does it really work, but to bring him as an individual, to bring him, he's a devout Muslim, to bring him for an experience to the country that he already is interested in. And he's not interested in Israel because of cherry tomatoes or the Iron Dome. He's interested in Israel because it's a real place with real people and a story that we need to tell, and we need to tell authentically, and we need to tell without it being like on the defense all the time. And so that's what we're doing. And hopefully this is the first of many trips that we'll do with our own flair, with our own chutzpah, whether it's WhatsApping the U.S. ambassador to Israel, asking for a meeting, or whether it's getting a future or current prime minister to meet him. A lot of organizations kind of over-bureaucratize, and we're really trying to run like a startup as much as we can, and trying to use that energy and hunger to really achieve great results. And just the last thing I'll say is the reason why a lot of organizations in America stagnate and kind of just copy paste, step and repeat, and don't really, make bold entrances into their focus areas is because they're so scared of their boards and scared of kind of like presenting to their board about ideas that may or may not fail. Thankfully, we have this great gift of not only a sizable endowment, but also a great gift of a board that is willing to take a bet on millennials to do exactly what they should be doing, which is dreaming big, which is looking at the issues, not looking at, what donor will give us X or Y. And hopefully the payoff will be huge, and the payoff will make it worth it. And I think that's the kind of energy and organization I want to work with, because some days we'll fail and some days we'll succeed. And, it's 2 million followers, hopefully if we succeed, we succeed big. And hopefully if we fail very discreetly.
It's, you mentioned something interesting, that a lot of organizations are over bureaucratizing it, and you're treating it as very much as a startup. You're very scrappy, very quick, WhatsApping the different people. Is that, that is type of a new behavior from this type of organization, right? Traditionally, these organizations are led by older people, older generations, much more, I guess, proper and suit and tie type of relationship. Here, you're saying there is actually a new generation of advocates for telling a narrative, telling a story, and this is why this may work.
Yeah, exactly. Look, there are some great organizations run by people over 50, and
sure.
I get it. I understand. But in terms of the mid and smaller organizations, I think it's, I really commend, our board who had the foresight and vision to invest in people, not for how old or experienced they are, though we're both pretty experienced, but really for the vision that they have and their passion to make a name both for themselves and, most importantly, the organization. And by the way, we, as an organization, we already have a pretty strong name in Israel for Bnai Zion, Bnai Zion Medical Center. In the heat of COVID in January 2021, we funded Yad Rosa, which is a new, not so new anymore, National Care Center for Holocaust survivors in Haifa. And we were scrappy enough to get it on the front page of the Washington Post on Holocaust Remembrance Day. And, many we got it by being scrappy. We got it by acting quickly. There are certain things in life that you can't outsource to other people and that you just have to take and run with. And it was a really proud moment for us and a great moment for us to realize that, yes, we can achieve great things. And because we got on the front page of the Washington Post, millions of Americans read about the work of Yad Rosa, the work of Bnai Zion, but also learned about the Holocaust and learned about Holocaust Remembrance Day in a way that wasn't passive and sad, though it's certainly sad and challenging to see Holocaust survivors who have urgent needs, but in a way that is proactive, that a way that's saying that we're remembering, but we're also caring for them. And I think many people would be shocked, especially in America, would be shocked to know how many Holocaust survivors in Israel there currently are, and horrified to see how they're not really being cared for with the dignity that they need and deserve. And, the work continues. We still support this amazing organization in Haifa every month, and we're looking to continue and grow that support. And it's a lot easier to bring in other partners when you have the the Washington Post, cheering you on the front pages. But this is just one small part of a larger picture of scrappiness, of dreaming big, of thinking about scope and scale, whereas many organizations, because they look to only serve the Jewish community in Israel or in America and only to engage, American Jews, which are, it's very expensive for a marketing firm to pinpoint a Jew in New York, whereas certainly through embracing TikTok and embracing Instagram, it's not very hard for us to engage millions of people if we can engage the right people and the right creators and celebrities, and if we could show them that we're worth partnering with, which we've been pretty successful thus far. So hopefully it continues.
Justin, thank you very much for all the great work that you're doing. Very inspiring also story for how you got here, and the intrinsic motivation that is bringing you to this. And it's felt, and the innovativeness is felt, the young nature of it is felt, but also the professionalism. So thank you very, very much. Best of luck with all these endeavors and more. And thank you for being here.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.